From the William B. Travis Building in Austin, Texas, we're keeping Texas energy on track. Here's your host, Bryce Doobie.
Welcome to Texas Energy on Track, the official podcast of the Railroad Commission of Texas. I am your host, Bryce Doobie, joined by my co-host and producer, Nick Cranock. Sir, how are you doing today?
You sirred me again. I can't get used to that. See, I was trying to think of something witty to say. I can't think of anything witty today, but I am excited. This is my favorite part of the job, getting in here, recording these podcast episodes. And as you always talk about, it's learning. I think we've had a repeat guest, but like this is the first actual repeat guest talking about similar subject matter, I think, and switching from winter to summer when it comes to inspecting, not to drop any hints or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I think the big elephant in the room, as we all know, this is Texas. It does get very hot here in the summer, which should surprise no one listening to this, which is why we thought that it'd be very important to bring back a previous guest, Gilbert Herrera, who is the Field Operations Director for Critical Infrastructure. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. So definitely appreciate being your first repeat guest. So thank you.
Well, I mean, this is a big, very important topic. I mean, just to kind of jump out in front of it, when I read through all of the news and things I do with my regular part of my job, we're seeing lots of conversations right now about demand in the summer rising. ERCOT's talking about like we're going to hit all sorts of things with both increased generation and things with the grid and all that, which we don't really work on from that end, but from the infrastructure side to getting the gas to these power plants and things, I know that's always a big deal, and it's something to kind of, I think, have a little bit more discussion on. We've talked in the past about winter, just to kind of refresh folks. I mean, I think just to catch folks up, you came on here and we talked previously about the winter inspection cycle. I mean, first and foremost, how did that go?
Winter cycle went well. So as y'all know, we had one major storm this past winter, so Winter Storm Fern. One thing we actually try to do every time we have one of these storms, we do operator outreach. So we not only do an outreach, but we have meetings pre-storm and then meetings during the storm. So with the top 20, 40 upstream operators, top 20, 40 midstream operators, we're constantly meeting with them every day. And then after the storm, once everything kind of settles down, me, myself, and others, we're reaching out to operators to set up meetings just to go over our lessons learned. And so here pretty soon, we're going to be updating some documents online just from things that we learned from these operators.
And just again to remind folks, when we're talking critical infrastructure, what's sort of like the baseline definition on what that is?
So critical infrastructure, which this is a really good question because a lot of different agencies have different definitions for this term. So for us, it's kind of an interchangeable term. I will define it as critical infrastructure being a natural gas supply chain facility that's on the supply chain map and then also deemed critical. So one thing that people may or may not be aware of, all because you're on the supply chain map doesn't mean that you're a critical facility and vice versa.
Digging a little more into that, so what does that mean from the end user perspective? And it's wintertime, I go to turn on the lights, I go to turn on the heat, I know that electricity is coming from somewhere, gas generated plant, and then from there it's going out gas production, all these things. What's part of the food chain does the Railroad Commission fit in for those inspections?
Those supply chain facilities are now known. So we know of the natural gas facilities that supply natural gas to the power plant. So that's your storage facilities, your gas processing facilities, your leases, your gas wells, your SWDs that also have a tie-in to this, supply chain. We know those assets. We know those locations. So if there ever is a time to load shed, we don't cut off that power because a lot of those facilities actually require power to operate. So you don't want to pretty much cut off your fuel if you're trying to, load shed to prevent a huge or total blackout. So we know those, and we also have a set definition of what we call critical, and that just means, certain facilities are deemed critical, leases that are above certain thresholds. So if you're under a threshold, you're not deemed critical. If you're over a threshold, you're deemed critical. If you're critical and on the supply chain, those are the facilities that we inspect. And so the reason we inspect is we make sure that operators are prepared to sustain operation during a winter event or extreme, weather emergency event.
And we've talked about some of that before on the winter side of things. And it's some of those things that you think about with protecting against cold weather and wind, freezing, things like that. We've got you here right now. I mean, and just knock on wood, we've had a slightly, at least while as of date of recording, our summer's been fairly mild so far. A little rainy, but fairly mild temperature-wise, but it does get hot. And there's an inspection cycle that we're going to be heading into for the summer. What's sort of the primary mission of the CID during summer inspection?
Yeah, so our primary mission for CID is we verify that the critical natural gas infrastructure is prepared to sustain operation during periods of extreme heat and, pretty much peak energy demand. As a lot of y'all, may or may not be aware, during the extreme heating or hot months of summer, that's when peak demand is out there. It gets hot across Texas everywhere. And there are certain areas that constantly see 100-degree plus weather. As you also know, everybody's cranking their AC during this time. And so that's when you see a peak energy demand. So we help ensuring that operators that are part of the natural gas supply chain, they do sustain operation during these high times of energy need. And so we are helping maintain that there is continuous delivery of natural gas to power plants that require natural gas to run.
And when we're talking extreme heat in the summer, you're looking for different things, I would imagine. I know in the winter, there's things with pipe insulation and different things like that. What is different about the summer inspections versus winter inspections, I guess?
Yeah, so just at a very high level, extreme heat in a way is very similar to winter. So both create operational challenges. It's just, during the winter, you're more worried about freeze-offs. So just like your home, you're preparing your home so your lines don't freeze. Well, during the summer, there's more of a chance for equipment failure due to other reasons like overheating, or you have a drop in efficiency, or you have more of a higher chance for power disruptions just because there's a higher demand for power. So there's an increase in chance that you will have your power cut off during summer. So operators are preparing for that. Even though you may not have a facility go down during the summer, you will likely see a drop in operational efficiency. So just like your car, during the summer, your car is actually less efficient as you're driving. During the summer, your car will see extreme heat, or as the heat makes the air hotter, the density also drops for air. Thus, your car requires more fuel to actually get that same amount of horsepower to move. So you're using more fuel. Also during the summer for your car, you probably have that AC cranked up. So your car is using more electricity to run that AC unit. Also in the summer, your car is experiencing more heat. So your electric fan to cool your engine is running constantly, whereas in winter it may come on, come off. And so just how your car experiences efficiency drop of 10 to 20%. You'll also see that on the natural gas side, because in the natural gas realm of operations, there's, a lot of things that require combustion engines. So just like your car, you'll also see a drop in efficiency in these natural gas facilities.
And I guess in that same time with those additional demand, there's those, like you said, those additional stresses on the systems as well. So making sure that everyone's kind of having that summer tune-up to be sure, hey, when we do have to throttle these things up in August when it's 103 out, the systems will run.
Yeah, 100%. With extreme heat, you'll focus on, your cooling systems. You'll focus on anything that is sun exposed. So especially electrical equipment or instrumentation. So you'll, want to make sure it's not constantly under the, sunlight, grabbing that radiation heat, things in that nature.
When you're taking a look at all of these things, are there particular regions in the state that are especially critical? How do you, South Texas versus North Texas, or is it, this is a statewide thing?
For Texas, I'm pretty sure everywhere during the summer it gets hot. So there's no part of Texas that stays cool. The areas that get extremely hot are going to be, South Texas, by the Rio Grande, and West Texas. It just so happens to work out, West Texas and South Texas, that's where you'll have the bulk of your natural gas being produced. So you have the Permian Basin in, West Texas, and then you'll have the Eagle Ford, and then the Dorado Play in South Texas. So it kind of works out that way, right? So, the highest risk areas just based on temperature are going to be West Texas and South Texas. That's also where you'll have the bulk of your natural gas critical infrastructure. And that's where we're spending a lot of our inspection time based on volumes. Now, you'll also see high temperatures around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Houston. So those right there are going to be your Barnett and your Haynesville. We're also highly involved with inspecting those areas because you'll see a lot of the large scale facilities there. And then of course you got the Panhandle with the Granite Wash. We're also inspecting that area. So yeah, everywhere in Texas it's going to be hot. So we're everywhere inspecting where there's natural gas supply chain facilities. Unlike winter, where you'll see, pockets of ice and snow here and there, or, by the off chance of freak storm, you'll see ice or snow everywhere. Summer, it's constantly everywhere in Texas.
Now, when we're talking about these inspections and things, what are some of the big things in the summertime? You already mentioned sort of with like radiation from the sun and just those types of heat. What are some of the other big things that inspectors are looking for during this cycle?
Yeah, so inspectors, we're out there, we're assessing the observation or weatherization of facilities. So this includes cooling systems. I mentioned electrical equipment, so that's a big one. A lot of these sites, well, pretty much almost every site has some form of electrical equipment, right? You don't want to produce gas and not measure it because that's how people make money. So you want to know the amount you're being produced. So a lot of that measurement requires devices or electrical equipment, and a lot of that is vulnerable to direct sun. So we're checking that. We're checking backup power systems if there are any. We're ensuring operators have communication plans in place, checking compressors. We're checking ventilation systems, make sure your HVAC system's working properly, make sure you have those set up to sustain operations during an extreme heat event. Yeah, overall, we're checking anything that reduces efficiency or that could cause overheating. Or, one thing that people don't realize is oil, right? So oil, like during extreme heat, it loses its viscosity properties. Thus, it has a high chance of damaging anything that requires lubrication. So we're making sure that, is something that operators are thinking about and have in place to fix.
And I know one other thing you mentioned in there, you said communication. So that's something that they're going out and inspecting for having, because I know when there is an event, for example, with Winter Storm Fern, and you were talking how we talk with operators, there's communications, there's regular updates happening. So that's part of the inspection, is this communication readiness, this kind of these protocols and things. How does that all work?
Yeah, so this was a pretty heavy topic that I tried to address with operators this past Winter Storm Fern. And it was brought up because, one thing that may or may not be realized is if we do lose power, and that be for whatever reason, whether it's a load shed event or somebody runs into a power pole, or, you have ice build up and it knocks down a pole. But if you lose power to certain regions, there's a high chance that you will lose power to phone towers. And so if you lose power to a phone tower and that phone tower is right by your facility that's on the supply chain, do you have a communication plan in place if your cell phones don't work? And I think a lot of people just think of, hey, is my phone charged? I'm good to go. Well, in a case where, things do get bad, you want to make sure you're planned for everything. And that's one of those things where you want to make sure you have a communication plan and process in place for anything. And that includes if you lose coverage on your phone, do you have a backup plan? And so a lot of these natural gas supply chain facility operators, they do have plans in place to where they do have satellite communication ready. They do have plans in place on, hey, here's the list of people that you need to contact in cases of emergencies or an event, or if you need something fixed. But yeah, communication was hit very hard, and it was a big topic during this past winter, and it's going to continue to be a big topic even during the summer, just because there is that higher chance of power loss. So we want to make sure operators are planned to still communicate with staff and just relay messages to them or check on them, make sure they're doing okay. You want to make sure that line of communication is still in place.
And we haven't started the cycle yet. You said that starts July 1st. And I know, just kind of thinking with all of that, I already kind of know the answer on this one because I think it depends on the facility and things, but is there like a specific checklist, or how does all of this work kind of in compliance with the rules that we have put in place?
For summer inspections, we focus on heat-related preparedness measures and operator considerations. So we do have online guidance for operators. It does contain common weatherization practices that we provide operators. It's very helpful context, and it's very helpful information for them, but it's not a uniform solution. Every operator, every facility, it's going to be unique in how they weatherize, and it's going to be based on conditions like type of facility. So your lease is not going to weatherize the same as a gas plant. You're going to have, obviously, different facilities located in different locations, right? So something that's along the Gulf Coast where they have to consider humidity for their extreme heat weatherization, it's not going to be the same for somebody up in the panhandle that doesn't deal with humidity as much as, Gulf Coast regions. There's going to be the age of facility. Some facilities are newer, some facilities are older, so you're going to also have that a consideration in how you weatherize or the design of the facility. Yes, we do have specific standards and checklists available online to operators to help them, but every facility is going to be unique. And that is what makes the job difficult, is because we have to consider everything for just that facility, not just a broad checklist where we go out and just mark things compliant or not compliant. There's a lot of critical thing that's involved with inspections.
Yeah, I mean, I was even thinking, it just kind of popped in my head as a random thought there, what way the thing faces in the sun. I mean, if there's a spot where it's just in the shade all day and it's not going to be under that same threat. I mean, something as minor as we built the building facing to the south.
No, exactly. And some facilities will, hey, we're going to build this on this hill, or we're going to build it here to prevent dust buildup. So that does also impact heat.
And also that humidity point, I think that's interesting as well. I hadn't even thought about that either. And then, I mean, thinking, down on the coast, that's a very different animal.
Going off that, in like West Texas, a lot of times you're doing a lot of preventive maintenance just to clear the dust, say off your, cooling fins. Whereas along the Gulf Coast, you may be doing the same thing for dust, but you're also doing it for salt buildup.
So kind of along that same route, in the wintertime when we have these sort of winter events, we know it's going to last X day to Y day. It's going to be these types of things. There's a bit more kind of science to it. The summer, I imagine, poses some different challenges on the planning side of it, because there's a severity of the heat, but it could also be the month of August, or the heat came back and now it's going to be 100 in the beginning of October. So is there some different challenges with planning for the summer as far as like the time for some of these things and all of that?
You pretty much hit the nail right on the head. So cold weather often creates acute situations or sudden situations where, hey, the storm's coming in a couple of days. So there is that sense of, you almost have like a timeline of when the storm's going to happen. You got to make sure you're doing your things correctly, make sure everything's up to date. And also, all your preparation in place may be in place months ahead of time during the winter, but just knowing that a storm's coming gives you that extra timeline of, hey, well, let me make sure everything is still okay. Let me make sure I have everything, set. Extreme heat, it lasts for months, July, August, those are going to be your hottest months. So it creates a sustained stress on your equipment. So you're constantly having to do more preventive maintenance. You're constantly have to do more checking on your facility. But the good thing is Texas, it's always been hot, right? So Texas is prepared. It's just we're constantly updating systems to be more and more prepared year after year, season after season.
And what happens is you're getting into this process and you get out to one of these sites and there is like, hey, someone's not in compliance. Like what happens to a facility that doesn't meet those standards?
Yeah, so if we go out and we determine that a facility is not in compliance, we do send them a violation. And so every violation, we give operators 30 days to comply with that violation. If we go out there and they haven't complied within 30 days, and it's still deemed non-compliant, then we do send this violation off to the AG office for penalties.
I'm just thinking of this in terms of like the human component. If you compare it that way, just an easy way of thinking about it. So, in the wintertime, hey, I can just put layers on to keep myself warm. In the summer, you can only take off a certain amount, Relating that to facilities, is there an quote unquote easier preparation for the extreme weather? Like in the winter, I know you can put up windscreens, you can put insulation. In the summer, I mean, like with fans and things, it seems like that there's, maybe because I don't know a whole lot, because it seems like that there's less that you can do, I guess, compared to the summer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. And in a way, yes and no. So, one example you brought up was during the winter, you could have a barrier for, wind protection. Well, you could have somewhat of the same barrier for summer, but instead of blocking wind, it's blocking the sun. So, whereas in winter, you want that sun, you want that extra heat from, radiation. During the summer, you're blocking the shade, but you're also tearing down, or not tearing down, but you're, removing wind walls, because in this case, wind is actually good for the summer. So you're getting rid of that stagnant air that may be hot. You're also doing a lot of cooling via heat exchangers. So, just like on your car, you have a radiator, you have an electric fan that cools the radiator and an engine. Same thing in the natural gas industry, right? There's a huge amount of heat exchangers being used. There's fans being used. There's air coolers, cooling towers. So in the winter, you're trying to prevent water from freezing. In the summer, you're just constantly trying to either cool the air, make sure there's air movement, or you're cooling the fluid.
Now, when we're identifying these facilities that are part of the critical infrastructure, I know there are some operators and things who might have there might be exemptions for certain things as far as that designation and things. How does that impact those inspections? And I know that's just a piece of kind of what goes into all this. How does all of that work?
It's actually pretty easy. So if you're on the supply chain, you actually are not eligible for a CIX. It doesn't have actually any impact on inspections. But if you're an operator and you're not on the supply chain, you can submit what we call a CIX. And we do have a CIX team here in Austin. So that CIX team is also the EOP team, which is the Emergency Operating Procedure, which are due this late August 31st. Just a little plug in there for operators to get those in a timely manner, give us some time to review them. But yeah, that team, they have a whole, process to review that submitted information that operators send in. So they'll submit supporting documentation on why, they want to have their CIX approved. And you can also find a lot of these help documents on the CID's website to further explain the CIX process. But the one thing that I wanted to, make sure listeners get away is, we help strengthen the reliability and the resilience of the natural gas supply chain. So we do this by ensuring that operators are prepared for that sustained operation during these weather emergency events. And so what that means is we're ensuring that there is that continued delivery of energy that Texans rely on every day, like for their AC, that's being met. And we do that by ensuring that these power plants receive the fuel they need to run their facility.
Thank you for the work that you do. And thank you so much for joining us today.
And if you want to inspect more about the Railroad Commission online, you did talk about rrc.texas.gov. That's our website where you can find all the information, especially about the Critical Infrastructure Division. But you can also hop over on social media on X at TXRRC and look for Railroad Commission of Texas on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. So we're out there with information and any, rural things or updates or things like that we post. And we just post a lot of information. So make sure you're following us on social media as well as your favorite podcast app. Make sure you subscribe. You get those notifications when a new episode is released. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We are on iHeartRadio, Amazon Alexa, Audible. So we are out there. Just make sure you do subscribe so you get those notifications every other Wednesday in case you forget.
Absolutely. Especially we know folks are traveling this summer, things like that going on. So better time to catch up on some back episodes. As always, thanks for listening to Texas Energy on Track, the official podcast of the Railroad Commission of Texas. We will talk to you all soon.